Before we even dive into this, viewer discretion is seriously advised. Everything you're about to hear is straight from official federal courtroom testimony during the Diddy trial, as reported by Inner City Press. So, it's day 7 of Diddy's federal trial, already wild, already chaotic, and just when everyone thought they'd seen it all, the courtroom doors swing open, and in walks Joe Rogan. No team, no PR people, no lawyer whispering in his ear. Just Joe holding a black notebook like he was about to change everything. This wasn't podcast banter anymore. This was real. And Joe wasn't here to speculate. He was there to testify, under oath. From the moment he opened his mouth, it was clear. This wasn't going to be a normal celebrity trial anymore. This was turning into something way bigger. Joe Rogan had receipts, literal recordings, interviews, memories of conversations that most people were too scared to even say out loud. And now, he was ready to expose everything. The room, tense, the press gallery, packed, people whispering, phones vibrating in pockets. And when Rogan, UFC commentator, stand-up comic, and host of the most downloaded podcast in the world, took the stand as a surprise witness, jaws hit the floor. He wasn't here for clout. He wasn't making a scene. He was making a statement. This was his intervention. Joe looked pretty low-key, dark gray blazer, jeans, but you could tell he was locked in. The judge asked for his name and profession, and he didn't hesitate. Joseph James Rogan. I'm the host of the Joe Rogan Experience. And then he dropped the calm act. I'm not here to gossip, he said. I'm here because people I've interviewed, bodyguards, label execs, insiders, they came to me when no one else would listen. And yes, I have recordings. I've kept them safe. Boom! The room shifted. Whispers everywhere. The judge leaned forward. Diddy's lawyers looked like they'd seen a ghost. Joe went on to explain how some of these guests shared stories off the record. Too scared to go public, too scared to go on the record, so they told him, because Joe wouldn't censor them when things got dark. And then he dropped the first bombshell. Back in 2023, Joe says he had a guest on, someone who refused to work security for a top-tier artist. Off-air, this guy claimed Diddy had files, not gossip, evidence. We're talking physical recordings, a private server, tucked away in a bunker-like vault inside his Miami estate. And here's where it gets insane. The guy claimed that Jay-Z, LeBron James, and other public figures knew about these so-called freak-offs. Maybe they didn't join in, but they knew. The courtroom, gasping. Diddy, visibly shaken. His lawyers, objection. Judge, overruled. Joe kept going. He said that guest told him the parties weren't just wild. They were rituals, phones taken, guests blindfolded. The phrase freak off wasn't slang, it was industry code, and nobody blinked an eye. The prosecution asked if Joe brought the tapes. He nodded, said he submitted excerpts to the DA's office already. Audio of insiders, some anonymous, and discussing these events. Forensic teams had already verified some of the voices, and then Joe said something that stopped every juror cold. I've had Navy SEALs, CIA whistleblowers, conspiracy theorists on my show. I've never heard anything as disturbing as this, and it's coming from the mouths of people at the top of the entertainment industry. Then he looked straight at Diddy and finished his statement. This isn't celebrity gossip. This is systemic abuse, hiding behind platinum records and red carpet smiles. And with that, Joe Rogan officially flipped the courtroom on its head. The courtroom was holding its breath. Joe Rogan hadn't even broken a sweat, but the weight of what he said next hit like a freight train. You could feel it in the room. This wasn't just about one man. It was about a whole machine built on silence and power. Joe leaned forward and started laying out the bigger picture. I've had Navy SEALs, ex-CIA, and conspiracy theorists on my podcast, he said, but none of them ever made my blood run cold like this. And then he took us back, way back. He said it started in 2018, maybe earlier. The pieces just didn't make sense at first. One of his early podcast guests was a tour manager for a major R&B artist. Came on to talk about the dark side of the music industry. Drugs, pay for play, the usual. But once the mics were off, that's when the real conversation started. He told me Diddy's parties weren't just wild, they were dangerous, Joe said. Things happened behind the scenes that even Hollywood doesn't dare whisper about. Joe explained that many of those off-the-record stories never made the final cut. Why? People were terrified. Some asked to distort their voices. One even requested the entire recording be done in a secluded cabin, miles from civilization. The paranoia was real, and then a specific story made everyone sit up straight. Joe brought up a producer who had been invited to a Diddy event back in 2015. What he saw, chilling. Hidden cameras in smoke detectors, substances dropped into drinks. Celebs walking around pretending not to see. Joe pulled out his old podcast notes, stuff he never shared publicly, and read a line that made jaws drop. "I saw people being filmed without consent," the source said. Diddy called it leverage. The judge blinked. The jury stirred. "And Diddy?" He looked rattled. His lawyers objected, obviously, but the judge waved it off. Joe clarified, "Not everything is verified. A lot of it is anecdotal, but the patterns, the names, the way they match up across years and people, you can't fake that." He talked about the private archive he's kept, the one full of recordings that never aired. Some guests made him sign NDAs before even speaking. Some only opened up off mic. But when the Jane Doe lawsuit started filing in, that's when the dots started connecting. Same names, same behavior, same nightmare stories, just from different mouths. Then Joe dropped another bomb. A prominent music video director came to him in 2022, sobbing. Said he had raw footage, actual tape of a Diddy party that had never seen the light of day, not edited, not censored, real. And this director, he'd been blackmailed into filming events like this for over a decade, said if he ever spoke out, his life would be over. Joe took a breath, steady but intense. "This isn't about opinions anymore," he said. "This is a reckoning. And I'm here because the people who trusted me with the truth deserve to be heard, even if they're too afraid to show their faces." And the room just sat there, frozen. Viewer, let me ask you this. Do you think Joe Rogan is exaggerating for the spotlight? Or is this the first crack in an industry-sized cover-up? Because if even a fraction of what he's saying is true, we're not just looking at one man on trial. We're looking at a culture that's been protected for decades. Let me know what you think in the comments. And yes, I read every single one of them. Joe Rogan's voice got lower, but his words hit even harder. What he was about to describe next took everything to a whole new level. Past rumors, past red flags, into the dark architecture of Diddy's world. He told the court that in 2022, a former bodyguard who worked at Diddy's Miami estate came on his podcast. Well, tried to. The segment never aired. The man got cold feet. But off mic, what he said was unforgettable. According to this bodyguard, hidden beneath Diddy's luxurious Miami compound wasn't just a basement. It was a vault, heavily reinforced, locked down with biometric scans, and guarded 24/7. Inside, dozens of encrypted hard drives, cameras, contracts, recordings. He called it the black box. Joe said the man looked him dead in the eye and said, "This is Diddy's insurance policy." And it wasn't just footage of random party guests. This was A-list blackmail material. Celebrities, executives, politicians, people who'd never want their faces linked to what was caught on tape. Some filmed without their knowledge, others maybe not so unaware. At that moment in the courtroom, a pin could have dropped. One juror reached for their water with a trembling hand. Diddy's defense team looked like they'd swallowed bricks. Joe paused for effect, and then added something that shook the room. "That bodyguard told me he once walked in during a backup session, saw rows of servers, air-gapped, offline, military grade, and before he could say anything, a man with a gun told him, 'You don't belong here.' The guard called it Diddy's church." Joe let that phrase linger, because whatever's down there, it's sacred to someone. Not sacred like holy, sacred like power. The judge allowed Joe's written affidavit into evidence. Now granted, the vault itself hadn't been physically confirmed, but the fact that multiple podcast guests years apart all described the same thing, that was enough for the prosecution to argue a clear behavioral pattern. Joe continued, "Two stylists who worked with bad boy artists told me about a room downstairs where security cameras pointed inward, not out. One of them said she was asked to sign an NDA in that exact room. She noticed a mirror with something off about it, a peephole embedded inside." He looked at the jury. "That's what's chilling. These are people from totally different walks of life, different times, and yet they describe the same places, the same rules, the same silence." Then Joe dropped a revelation that hadn't yet surfaced in open court. 3 months ago, a whistleblower contacted my team, said they worked at a third-party data recovery company in Miami, claimed they were hired to extract corrupted video from a Diddy-linked server, and what they sought was so disturbing they refused to delete the recovery copy. The courtroom erupted. Joe said he never aired the footage, but he archived it, just in case this trial escalated to a federal seizure. And if that drive was now in government hands, the truth might already be out there. Then Joe turned and looked directly at Diddy, his voice steady. "If you're innocent, open the vault. Let them search the basement. Release what's in the black box. And I have to ask, what do you think Diddy's hiding in that vault? Could it really be that bad? Or is all this just smoke with no fire?" Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm in there reading everything. Joe Rogan flipped through his worn stack of notes, fingers twitching slightly. His voice slowed, but the tension in the courtroom only thickened. "This isn't about parties anymore," he said, his eyes locked. on the jury. This is about patterns of silence, of complicity. He started naming names, not of perpetrators but of those who were there. Witnesses, enablers, the ones who walked through the smoke but never said a word. There was a hairstylist, Joe continued. She came on the show to talk fashion, but off-air she confessed why she really quit the industry. She said she saw things at one of Diddy's Hamptons parties she couldn't unsee. He paused. She told me that behind a locked hallway door there was a private room with a two-way mirror, and through it, someone was being filmed. They didn't know. And the one watching? Joe looked up. She said Jay-Z was there. Gasps. Cut through the courtroom like a blade. Rogan was quick to clarify. She didn't say he took part, but she said he was present more than once, walking through the parties like a ghost, always there, never speaking, never staying, just watching. Joe let the silence speak for itself. I've heard the same thing, he added. From dancers, producers, ex-security, Jay-Z and Diddy, two sides of the same coin. Puff was loud, chaos. Jay was silent, control. But the backdrop, always the same. He described confronting a music executive off record, asking him why no one had ever publicly held Diddy accountable. The exec just laughed and said, "You can't take down Puff without taking down Hov too." The prosecution jumped on that line. It backed their theory that this wasn't just about one man, but a network built on mutual silence and protection. Then Rogan added a metaphor that stuck to the walls like paint. If Diddy was the fire, Jay-Z was the smoke detector that never went off, a beat of silence. Then he dropped another shockwave. Joe said his podcast team had received anonymous messages warning them to stop digging. One email said, "Don't go too deep, Joe. You'll end up like the ones who did." They traced the IP. It led back to a media firm tied to Roc Nation's PR team. The judge allowed the reference, with caution. But the implication was crystal clear. Joe turned toward the jury again. Silence isn't just passive, he said. It's strategic. It's protection. This whole machine, it runs on people keeping their mouths shut. And bro, here's the twist I need your help thinking about. Do you believe these celebrities really stayed quiet because they were scared, or because they were part of the system all along? Let me know below, and you already know I'm replying to every single comment. Joe wasn't done. He shifted gears to the lawsuit filed by a man only referred to as Man Zero. It sounded bizarre at first, the claim that he was paraded through a party wearing a human anatomy-themed mask. But Joe said he spoke to someone who'd been there, someone who'd seen it all with his own eyes. He was a young videographer, early 20s, thought he was just hired to film the happy stuff at a January 2023 yacht event, but what he saw broke him. Joe read directly from the young man's anonymous transcript. There were celebrities everywhere. LeBron James, Gloria Estefan, Beyoncé, Jay-Z. On the surface, it looked glamorous, but deeper into the boat, it got dark, red lights, restrained guests, a man wearing a mask led around like a pet. The jury didn't move. No one did. Joe said the man turned over his memory cards that night and was handed $5,000 in cash, told he'd get the final edit. He never did. 2 weeks later, his apartment was broken into. The only thing missing, his external hard drives. The court officially logged that account as evidence. This isn't chaos, Joe said slowly. It's a system, and the people we idolize, the ones we give Grammys to, build statues of, they're in the rooms where it happens. Then came the line that will haunt the industry if this ever makes it to court. If even one of those tapes gets played in this courtroom, half of Hollywood is finished. He closed his notebook, looked at Diddy. I'm not afraid of lawsuits. I'm afraid of what happens if we keep pretending none of this is real. By now, the courtroom didn't feel like a courtroom anymore. It felt like a storm shelter, and everyone inside was bracing for the collapse. Joe Rogan stood up from his chair, not because he was asked to, because he needed to. His voice dropped, steady as ever. This isn't about canceling Diddy, he said. It's about finally holding someone accountable who built an empire on fear. The judge allowed him a closing statement. Even the sketch artist stopped drawing. Joe looked down, then back up. Over the years, I've interviewed astronauts, scientists, philosophers, ex-spooks. You learn how to tell when someone's lying, and you learn when someone's scared. Really scared. He paused. And I'm telling you right now, the stories I've heard about Diddy, they didn't come from trolls. They came from people who couldn't stop shaking when they told them, people who looked over their shoulder every 10 seconds. Then he dropped the final card. Joe said, if federal agents ever get access to that rumored black box, the encrypted, archived Diddy kept beneath his Miami compound, it wouldn't just break this trial wide open. It would destroy the foundation of Hollywood itself. Because according to Rogan, inside that vault are tapes of freak-off events filmed with hidden cameras, contracts, blackmail, compromising footage, evidence that links celebrities, politicians, and power players in ways that no PR team could ever clean up. And then he added the detail that made the gallery visibly flinch. One of my guests, a whistleblower from a data recovery company, told us there was footage on those drives that included a very powerful politician. I'm not naming names, but if the feds have that tape, this trial is just the pregame. The judge ordered that line stricken from the record. Didn't matter. The damage was already done. Joe looked at Diddy and said loud and clear, "You didn't just throw parties. You built a vault, and that vault holds every secret this industry pretends doesn't exist, and if even one key turns, it all comes flooding out." Then he spoke directly to the jury. Silence is a system. You get invited to a party, you sign an NDA, you get filmed without knowing, and a month later you get a text, "Had fun last month, so let's keep that between us." He called it invisible handcuffs. Joe told them about a Grammy-winning producer who was offered a massive career boost in exchange for deleting one specific video. He refused. A week later, 3 venues cancelled his tour. Then came the final chilling detail. A guest who worked with a celebrity security firm told me there was a folder, not metaphorical, a real one. Diddy called it the rainy day file. It was his backup, insurance. If anyone tried to bring him down, he had something to bring them down first. Joe took a deep breath. One of those files allegedly featured a politician so big, I can't even say the name, but if those tapes get played, this trial will look like a warm-up act. The courtroom was stone still. Finally, Joe stepped down. He walked past the defense table, and for the first time, Diddy didn't look up. The man who built an empire on fear was now surrounded by it. And Joe, he didn't smile. He didn't flinch. He just looked straight ahead, because this wasn't about podcast clips or viral headlines anymore. This was about pulling back the curtain on a world that was never supposed to be seen. "I've said a lot on the mic," Joe whispered to the court. "Some of it dumb, some of it funny, but this is the one time I needed every word to matter. Because if even one kid out there is saved from stepping into that nightmare, every threat, every NDA, every silent producer, it was worth breaking." And that was how Joe Rogan left the stand. Not as a host, not as a brand, but as a witness to power, to silence, and to the truth they all tried to bury.